Hello and welcome to Bags of Action. My name's Steve, and this is a review of The Mandalorian Season 1. Rather than just focus on the story, I wanted to look at some of the other aspects of the show that have made this so unique compared to other films and even the animated shows that have been around for the last 15 or 20 years. The two key people behind the project are Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. Dave Filoni in the past has worked on a number of animated shows, and that seems to have been his main focus, whereas Jon Favreau started 10 years ago with the Marvel Universe. He did the first Iron Man film, and before that he had obviously directed and acted in a number of films. A few years later, he did The Jungle Book and The Lion King for Disney, which combined live action with blue screen and even slightly new technology that they've been working on, these LED screens. So when he was asked to work on a new show and he came up with the idea for The Mandalorian, they wanted to do something completely different and tried to move the technology forward again, combining all of his knowledge from the last two films that he'd worked on with that of Dave Filoni's on the animated. So the way they put together a show even before they start filming it is rather unique. And this led to the creation of some unique technology that has never been seen before. While LED screens are not new, and they were even used by Jon Favreau on The Jungle Book, what he did with there was he combined blue screen technology with some actual set in the front for characters to interact with, the main actors, but also people who were dressed in blue CGI suits who were then touched up later in post-production. All of this led to the development of something called the volume. This is a unique space with enormous LED walls which combine with actual set in the front to create something unique, where you may have part of the main Mandalorian ship that they can interact with, but the rest of it is created virtually together with the background and the space, and because of perspective on the technology, it looks absolutely real, and they're able to blend these two things together. If you've not watched it, then in addition to the Mandalorian TV series on Disney+, there are behind-the-scenes episodes that focus on different aspects. One is the technology, there's another one about the casting, another one about the music, and so on. And all of it is really incredible because it combined a number of existing technologies and developed some new ones into something that had never existed before. And strangely, on some of the episodes in the background, you can see that George Lucas has visited the set. And when he talks about the technology when he was making the prequel trilogy, there are certain things that he obviously wanted to do, but he was too far ahead of the time. And in a way, I think this is what he was aspiring to have, and yet it was maybe 10 or 15 years away from being a reality. The other thing they've got really right on this show, which I think they failed to do with even the latest sequels in the Skywalker saga, was that not being a complete slave to the past and yet being aware of it. So rather than having continuity as a shackle, they're able to move between it or just use it as reference points and then go off and tell their own stories. And this is something I always complained about with the new films. There's this huge Star Wars universe, and apart from the odd one that even then is still quite heavily tied to things we've seen before, we never got to explore new spaces. And in this TV show, we get to go to all corners of the universe, get to see some fantastic races, and tell very small stories that build into something greater and something much larger over the course of a series, which is something you'd expect from a normal TV series. And yet this is something we've never seen live action, at least in the Star Wars universe. In terms of style, the comparisons between this and westerns is very obvious, and Jon Favreau has talked about this. That he's inspired by both Japanese films by Kurosawa and also the spaghetti westerns, the Sergio Leone and all of this sort of stuff, where a stranger comes to town to solve a problem and moves from place to place. And this is something we've seen in many of the early films with Clint Eastwood. And those were the two focuses that he was using as reference points, and yet telling those kind of stories within the Star Wars universe. The music by Ludwig Göransson has a very old school feel. He went back and found old guitar synthesizers and keyboards. He picked up some of the old instruments, big recorders and all of this sort of stuff to create an old school sound, something that's similar to what we had in the first trilogy, but also moving it on and adding something new to it. So it isn't a copy, it doesn't have the same themes in terms of character moments, and yet it developed its own style that paid homage to the past whilst also moving things forward. Once again, doing the same thing as they did with the story and what has gone before in the past in terms of characters and world building, the fall of the Empire, and so on. The cast in this show is something rather special as well. Whether it's Pedro Pascal as a Mandalorian, someone who never takes his helmet off, in theory, at least he does most of the time, he keeps it on. You have Gina Carano as Cara Dune. You have Moff Gideon, played by Giancarlo Esposito, seen most recently in things like Breaking Bad and The Boys. You've got Carl Weathers as Greef Karga. And gradually over the course of the show, the Mandalorian meets other characters and interacts with them. You even have someone like Werner Herzog as the client. He's an amazing director in his own right who wanted to be a part of this, so it says something for the material. And over the course of the show, the Mandalorian meets other characters, he interacts with them, and he slowly builds up a roster of friends, or at least allies, people that he can call on. And it's all done within the scope of 8 episodes in a very organic fashion. What amazes me is that they seem to do so much with so little, in terms of each episode can range from anywhere from sort of 29 minutes to 45 minutes. There's no limit in terms of what they used to be. You don't have to have a break at certain points for adverts. It doesn't have to run to a maximum of, say, 42 minutes in order to create a 1-hour show, because it's exclusive on the Disney Plus streaming platform. Therefore, it can be as long as it needs to be. And the script can flex and contract as required by the director or the actors, or when they're shooting action scenes. If it needs to be a bit longer, it can be. There's no restrictions. And equally, as the series builds towards a finale, they can have a slightly longer episode because there's no reason not to. The only limit is budget and time for them filming within the volume. Ironically, because 2020 has been an unusual year for lots of reasons, and of course COVID, filming in a volume proved to be very successful because it limited the number of people in the space. It means that they didn't have to go very far in terms of filming sets or locations for any outdoor shoots. They were able to proceed more or less without any interruptions to the schedule, compared to a lot of other TV shows that have had to shut down for months at a time only to restart and close and so on over the last 12 months. Of course, this is not forgetting the popularity of the show, which many fans, both new Star Wars fans and old school fans like me, who watched the original trilogy back in the day, have been delighted by this because it brings together so many things. There are things in there for the younger audience, and there are other lines and certain nods for a much older audience, but it doesn't try to appeal to everybody on the same level as some TV shows do by talking down to people or making it so simple that even a 5-year-old could enjoy it. There is violence in the show, and there are some aspects that younger audiences might be uncomfortable with, but because it's done within the Star Wars way, there aren't huge amounts of blood. It's with blasters or lightsabers, and they never tended to show you anything even back in the films, and they don't really do that here either. The Mandalorian was very much a model for what they could do in the future, and its success has proven itself with the fans and also with the filmmaking community, because they've had many big directors working on individual episodes, they've had a lot of big actors, and they've had a lot of attention, and obviously the popularity with Disney has made them very happy, which has now led to an explosion of nearly a dozen Star Wars TV shows coming over the next 3 or 4 years. Some of them are animated, some of them will be one-offs, and the full spectrum of shows is now available. They're no longer limited to just doing stories within the Skywalker saga. They can move back and forward in time. They could do one 10,000 years before the events of A New Hope. They could do something after the fall of the First Order. They can do spy shows. They can do action shows. They can do Jedi shows that focus on individuals that we've never met before and go off to dark and mysterious corners of the universe and tell new and interesting stories. And that's what it looks like the future of the Star Wars universe has. There are a lot of shows coming on Disney Plus. There are some new films in the schedule with various directors talking about their involvement and hinting at things. But it seems that this has very much opened the doors for what they're going to do going forward. When Disney bought Lucas and they talked about developing the last 3 episodes, we all thought this was the start of something great. And what we got was a real mishmash. It had the potential to do well, but it never followed through. It wasn't done consistently. It moved from director to director. The story arc over the 3 episodes was a mess. And by the finale, it was just a catastrophic, total shambles. The Mandalorian has proven what can be done. This is the fulfillment of something special. Going forward, there are going to be interesting stories, unique characters, and it's all going to be new and fresh. And for the first time in about 20 years, I'm actually interested and excited by Star Wars in the way that I haven't been since The Return of the Jedi. For me, The Mandalorian is the best Star Wars that we've had since that film, because the prequels were a mess and the sequels that we had were an absolute shambles. This is what I've been waiting for 20 years. I'm excited to see season 3 when it comes out soon. I'm excited to see this spin-off shows, which I won't spoil and talk about. All the information is available online. You can go and look it up. But this is the start of something special, and I'm really excited to see where they go and what they do next with some fantastic characters that we've seen, some in The Mandalorian having their own spin-offs, and some new ones being introduced by new directors, new creators, and new writers. And this is what it's all about, a true golden age of TV, and I look forward to seeing more of it. That's all from me. If you like what we do here, don't forget to support the show. You can contact us via email or on the Facebook group. You can like and subscribe, leave a comment below. You can support us on Ko-fi. We have new episodes coming out every week. And that's it for now. Thanks for listening.